A racist manager named Mr. Henry humiliates Edna, a black woman checking in, and questions her right to stay at the luxury hotel. But what she did next turned the entire situation and their lives completely upside down. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. In front of the shiny glass doors of the Starlight Hotel, Edna Johnson stood. She was nervous and excited at the same time. She took a deep breath in and smelled the sweet scent of the flowers that were in bloom along the front door. It was her first real holiday in a long time. Because Edna was a nurse, she was used to long shifts, lots of work, and the constant noise of a hospital. But she felt like she was in a different world when she was on the hotel grounds, away from the beeping monitors and pressing calls of her daily life. "You deserve this," she told herself quietly as she held her small bag. She felt the smooth fabric of her favorite sundress, which she had packed especially for this trip. Even though it wasn't her normal scrubs, Edna was determined to enjoy every moment of rest. A cool breeze came over her as she pushed through the door that turned around. Edna's eyes got bigger as she looked at the fancy lights and soft carpets. It was bigger than she thought it would be, and she felt out of place for a moment. Edna was amazed when she walked into the Starlight Hotel's grand lobby. The polished marble floors were lit up by crystal lights that sparkled in the sky. She couldn't quite place the smell that filled the air. It was soft and luxurious. It was very different from the clean hospital hallways she was used to. Being suddenly aware of how out of place her worn-out suitcase looked among the fancy bags being rolled around by other guests, Edna clutched it even tighter. She smoothed out her simple sundress and wished she had brought something better. A group of well-dressed women walked by her, and she could hear their shoes clicking on the marble floor. They talked and laughed, and they seemed at ease in this fancy place. Edna couldn't help but notice how well groomed their hair and nails were, which was very different from how she looked. Edna heard bits of talks about golf courses, spa treatments, and high-end restaurants as she walked to the check-in desk. A pang of doubt went through her. Would she be okay here? Could she really unwind in a place that was so different from where she usually lived? Edna straightened her shoulders and walked up to the front desk, even though she was feeling more and more self-conscious. As she walked in, the receptionist smiled at her, which made her feel better. "Welcome to the Starlight Hotel, ma'am. How may I assist you today?" the friendly front desk worker asked. Edna messed up her confirmation of the ticket. "Hi, I have a reservation under Edna Johnson," she said, trying not to shake her voice too much. Edna looked around the lobby while the front desk worker handled her check-in. She saw a couple who looked very nice walking into the hotel. Their brand clothes and sure confidence caught her eye. The light hit the woman's diamond necklace and made it sparkle brightly. At the same time, Edna felt both impressed and uneasy. She had been cutting costs and working extra hours for months to save for this trip. Still, there were people who seemed to breathe luxury like air. A tall, middle-aged man in a perfect suit came up to Edna while she quietly waited at the front desk. His name tag shone, Mr. Henry, hotel manager. He looked over at Edna and made a thin line with his lips. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Henry?" asked the front desk worker in a cold voice. The front desk worker looked lost. "No, sir, I'm just checking in, Miss Johnson." Mr. Henry fixed his eyes on Edna and looked at her closely. It made Edna's stomach clench when he asked her name over and over. "I see. And you're sure you have a reservation, Miss Johnson?" Edna tried to keep her voice steady as she nodded. The man raised an eyelid and said, "Yes, I do. For a week." She asked, "Our rooms are pretty pricey. Are you sure you can afford this?" The words hit Edna like a bad punch. She felt her face getting hot from being ashamed and mad. It made her feel even worse when other guests nearby turned to look. Edna calmly said, "I've saved up for this vacation," even though her heart was beating fast. "I promise I can afford it," Mr. Henry said, with a smirk on his face. "Well, if you say so. Just know that our reservation costs more than usual. We don't want any surprises when we check out." Edna took a deep breath and pushed back the pain that was about to overpower her. She had dealt with bias before, but she wasn't ready for it to happen here, on her well-deserved vacation. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Henry," she said politely, keeping her voice steady even though she was upset. "I've budgeted carefully for this trip. I'm sure everything will be fine." Mr. Henry seemed shocked by how calm she was. He cleared his throat. It was clear that he wasn't used to being treated with such respect when he was being rude. He quickly replied, "Very well," then turned on his heel and walked away. The receptionist looked embarrassed as she quickly finished checking Edna in. She whispered, "I'm so sorry about that, Miss Johnson," and gave him the room key. "Enjoy your stay with us." With a small smile, Edna took the key and turned toward the lifts, her hand shaking a little. There were interested looks from other guests who had seen what was going on. She no longer felt as excited as she did earlier, because she had a heavy weight in her chest. She sat down in a soft armchair in the lobby and tucked her suitcase nicely next to her. The rich setting seemed to make fun of her now, which was very different from the warmth and comfort she had hoped to find. She took out her phone to take her mind off of how hurt Mr. Henry's words still made her feel. She was reading her text when she heard a quiet conversation nearby. A white, middle-aged couple was sitting on the couch across from her, and their luxury bags were piled up all around them. It was hard for Edna to hear them, because they were talking quietly. The woman whispered, "Harold, did you see that?" and looked quickly at Edna. "Harold," the other man agreed. "I can't believe they're letting anyone stay here now." She said, "I know, dear. It's not like it used to be. How can someone like that even afford this place?" Edna clenched her phone. Even though she closed her eyes, every mean word hurt her ears. "Maybe she's someone's maid," the woman said, with a sneer in her voice. "Or perhaps she won some sort of contest. There's no way she belongs here otherwise." There was a lump in Edna's throat. She had saved for months and looked forward to the peace and comfort she would find on her trip. Those dreams seemed to be falling apart around her now. But while they kept talking about hurtful rumors, Edna took a deep breath. She stood up straight and raised her chin, not letting their lack of knowledge make her feel less important. No matter what other people thought, she knew she deserved to be there. Edna stood up, grabbed her things, and walked to the elevators with quiet dignity. The couple was looking at her back, but she didn't look at them. Edna let out a shaky breath as the elevator doors shut behind her. She was calm, but her heart was heavy with the weight of prejudice that she couldn't seem to get away from, not even on vacation. Before Edna went into her hotel room, she took a moment to look around. It wasn't as big as she thought it would be, and it wasn't even close to the fancy room she had booked. She sighed as she realized that Mr. Henry had to be behind this. Even though she was upset, she tried to see the good things. The room was neat and cozy, and the bed looked nice. There was also a small window with a view of the city. After putting her bag down, Edna sat down on the edge of the bed. The events of the day made her shoulders sag. When she closed her eyes, she thought about the rude receptionist, Mr. Henry's lack of interest, and the couple's hurtful whispers in the hallway. She got a lump in her throat and could feel tears forming behind her eyes. Eileen said to herself, "No," and shook her head. As she took a big breath in, the cool, fresh air filled her lungs. "I won't let them ruin this for me." As she let out a breath, she pictured getting rid of all the bad feelings that had been building up since she got there. Edna got up and went to the window, where she looked out at the busy city below. She said softly, "This is my vacation," and her voice got stronger. "I worked hard for this. I deserve to be here." After putting her things away, Edna went back to her bag and carefully hung up her clothes in the small closet. She tried hard to ignore the mean statements while she worked and concentrate on the coming week. She thought about the treatments she was going to get at the spa, the restaurants she wanted to try, and the places in the area she wanted to see. She thought of herself lying by the pool with a book in her hand. And she didn't have to worry about anything. Edna told the empty room, "I'm going to make the most of this. It doesn't matter what other people say or think. I'm here to relax and have fun." Edna finished unpacking and took a shower to feel better. She raised her chin and straightened her shoulders as she looked at herself in the mirror. Edna got up and left. She left her room determined to check out the hotel's features. She went to the spa first because she thought it would help her relax. As she walked into the peaceful room, the smell of lavender and eucalyptus welcomed her. A receptionist said, "Welcome," but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Edna said, "Do you have an appointment?" and shook her head. "No," the receptionist's smile got tighter as she said, "No, just looking around for now." "I see. Well, feel free to browse our services." While Edna looked over the spa menu, she couldn't help but notice how other guests were looking at her with sideways looks. When she looked at them, a couple who were whispering quickly turned their heads away. Her chest hurt with the familiar pain of being a stranger, but she pushed it away. Edna then went to the area with the pool. The warm sun made the water sparkle and look inviting, and there were soft lounge chairs all along the deck. She sits down in an empty chair and opens a book she had brought with her. Edna became aware of a slight change in the air around her as she read. People talking nearby stopped talking, and she could feel the weight of curious looks on her. A group of women relaxing nearby kept looking at her with confused and rude looks on their faces. Edna chose to look around the gardens because she felt uneasy. She walked along curving paths that were dotted with bright flowers and well-kept hedges. The beauty of the place made her feel better for a short time, but she couldn't get away from the thought that someone was watching her. A groundskeeper who was taking care of some roses stopped what he was doing and looked at her strangely as she walked by. Edna smiled at him, but he quickly looked away and went back to his work with increased concentration. As the day went on, Edna kept thinking about the things that had happened earlier. It was impossible to deny how fancy the hotel was. But the constant looks and whispers from both guests and staff made her feel like she didn't fit. By the time evening came around, Edna was not nearly as excited. As she made her way back to her room, the events of the day made her shoulders feel heavy. Even though she was in a very nice place, she couldn't get rid of the feeling that she wasn't wanted there. She went back to the pool area and was determined to enjoy the warm sun in the afternoon. She went to a quiet area away from the other guests and sat down in a nice lounge chair. She closed her eyes and took a big breath in. The sound of water lapping gently against the edge of the pool calmed her down. Edna thought about her job as a nurse as she lay there. She thought of all the people she had helped over the years. Her mind went back and forth between their faces. There was the old man who didn't have any family left, but always met her with a warm smile. The brave young mother who was fighting cancer with Edna's unwavering support. And the scared little boy who held her hand tight during his first hospital stay. Edna felt a small smile on her face as she thought about the people whose lives she had changed. People had turned to her in their darkest hours, giving them support and hope when they needed it the most. It was worth it, even when it wasn't easy. Edna thought about the things she had given up for her job, like the long nights, the holidays she had to miss, and the mental toll of taking care of others every day. She had given so much of herself to her patients that her own wants and needs were often put aside. Edna felt calm as the sun touched her skin. She told herself that she deserved this time to relax and get her energy back. Because of how hard she worked, she now has some time to relax. Edna opened her eyes and looked at the pool's water. She took a big breath in and smelled the chlorine and sunscreen. For the first time since she got to the hotel, she felt truly at ease. As she thought about how valuable she was and how valuable her work was, the mean looks and whispers seemed to go away. After a moment of peace, while Edna basked in the sun, she heard sounds she knew. When she opened her eyes, she saw the middle-aged couple from the lobby. It was the same pair that had said those mean things earlier. As of now, they were sitting in lounge chairs close to her and laughing and talking with other guests. Edna felt her heart sink a little. As they sipped colorful drinks and laughed together, the pair looked so carefree. The words they had said earlier came back to her and hurt just as much as they had in the hallway. She saw how easily they got along with the other guests, their smiles making everyone feel welcome. Edna felt a lot of different feelings at once. When she thought about how they had questioned her right to be at this hotel, she felt hurt, but she also felt angry. Why should they be able to have fun while making other people feel bad? Edna took a deep breath and tried to push away her bad feelings. She told herself that the trip was worth all the work she had put in. She had every right to be here, just like everyone else. The couple's bias was their issue, not hers. Edna closed her eyes again because she didn't want their presence to get in the way of her ease. She concentrated on the way the sun felt on her skin and the sound of the pool water splashing. She thought about all the people she had helped and changed because of her work. Those were the things that were really important. Still, it was hard to avoid the couple's chatter and laughter. While Edna was looking at them, she couldn't help but wish she could talk to them about how they had behaved earlier. She knew that wouldn't help though. She tried to think happy thoughts instead, telling herself how valuable she was and how important her work was. Edna tried to ignore the couple's laughter as she lay by the pool, but her thoughts kept going back to the past. She remembered her first day as a nurse. She was excited to make a difference and had just graduated from school. The fun didn't last long when a patient refused her care and asked for a real nurse instead. Even now, that memory hurt, but Edna decided to act in a kind and professional way. She had gently told the patient about her experience and credentials, which earned her trust. Because of her great care, she remembered something else. A man had called her racist names while she was helping his wife during a busy night shift in the emergency room. Despite the husband's mean words, Edna kept her mind on her patient and saved the woman's life, even though her hands were shaking. Even though they were painful, these memories made Edna realize how strong she was. She had dealt with bias before and always found a way to get past it. She didn't care what color her skin was. She let her work speak for itself. It changed lives and made a difference. Edna opened her eyes and looked up at the clear blue sky. She understood that these events had changed her and made her strong. Both of them, the couple by the pool and Mr. Henry at the front desk, were just new forms of old problem. Edna's lips were pulled together in a small smile. She had worked hard for years and finally earned this break. That was hers, and no one could take it away. Like everyone else, she deserved to be here and enjoy the comfort and rest. Edna sat up in her lounge chair with more purpose than before. The woman resolved not to let anyone's bias ruin her well-earned break. She was going to love her stay and enjoy the peace and ease that she didn't get to experience very often. While Edna took a big breath, she felt calm come over her. No matter what other people said or thought, she was here, and she belonged. She would make the most of it. Anything else didn't matter to her. She knew how much she was worth. As the sun went down, casting a warm glow over the hotel gardens, Edna went to the restaurant in the hotel. To meet her, the maitre d' gave her a friendly nod and led her to a small table by the window. While she was sitting down, Edna couldn't help but feel both excited and scared. There were soft classical music playing in the background and crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The restaurant looked very fancy. After smoothing out her dress, Edna felt a little out of place among the other diners in their expensive clothes. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she belonged here just as much as everyone else. Edna looked over the menu and gasped when she saw how much everything cost. She chose a special meal for herself because she knew she had worked hard for this moment. When the waiter came, she placed her order with confidence, ready to savor every bite. Edna looked at the other people at the table while she waited for her food. Some businessmen were laughing loudly at a table nearby. and their noise could be heard all the way across the room. To get the waiter's attention, they snapped their fingers and barely looked up as they placed their order for pricey wine bottles. Two people to her left were arguing quietly about how bad their appetizers were and insisted on talking to the cook. The waiter quickly left, looking upset and sorry, and Edna watched. Edna stopped to think about these exchanges. What she saw was a lot of luxury and entitlement, which was very different from the world she knew as a nurse. Being thankful and kind were very important to her job, but it seemed like some people here took their comfort for granted. As her meal came out on fine china, beautifully arranged, Edna felt like she had a new purpose in life. She noticed that working as a nurse and helping different types of people, when they were at their weakest, had given her a unique view. She was strong enough to deal with any problems that came up during her stay, even if they were racist or just plain rude. Edna enjoyed every bite of her dinner, savoring the tastes and the rare chance to treat herself. She felt a quiet confidence building in her as she ate. Some of the other guests may have had expensive clothes or a strong sense of entitlement, but she had something much more valuable: kindness, strength, and a deep understanding of what was important in life. When Edna woke up the next morning, soft sunshine was coming in through her hotel room door. She smiled and stretched, feeling good and ready to start the day. She was excited to explore the nearby town, and the bad things that happened yesterday seemed to fade away. Edna climbed out of bed, went to the window, and pulled back the curtains to see a lovely view of the area. With its cute buildings and streets lined with trees, the town below looked warm and inviting. She was excited to find its secret gems. Edna hummed a happy tune as she got ready for the day. She wore something stylish and comfy that was great for a day of sightseeing. She took a big breath and looked at herself in the mirror while she put on her makeup, telling herself, "Today is going to be a good day. Think about the good things. Leave the bad things behind." Edna refocused and put together her bag with something she would need for the day: a water bottle, her cash, and a small guidebook she got in the hotel lobby. She put on her favorite walking shoes and got ready for a day of exploring. She stopped for a moment before leaving her room. To get herself back on track, she closed her eyes and took another deep breath. She thought about all the great things she could see and do today, like the shops, bars, and maybe even a few museums. She was excited about the prospects. She got up with a spring in her step and walked to the hotel lobby. She kept her head up and told herself that she deserved to be here, and that she should enjoy her trip to the fullest. She saw Mr. Henry at the front desk as she walked through the hallway. She didn't try to avoid his eyes. Instead, she smiled and nodded to him. She wasn't going to let his past actions bring her down. Edna felt free and ready for an adventure as she walked out of the hotel into the bright morning sun. The town was waiting for her, and it was full of new sounds, sights, and things to do. Being ready for anything the day might bring, she took a big breath of fresh air and walked down the street. As Edna left the hotel, the warm sunshine caressed her face and made her feel good about the day ahead. She breathed deeply and enjoyed the fresh air and the thought of new things to come. She did, however, run into the same middle-aged couple from the day before as soon as she hit the curb. The couple, who were wearing fancy vacation clothes, didn't even look at Edna as they walked up. The woman looked over her like she didn't care, and the man didn't even bother to look up from his phone. Their noses were slightly turned up, giving off an air of authority that was hard to miss. Ira felt a familiar sting in her chest for a short time. The couple's actions made me think of the mean comments and critical looks that were made yesterday. But as soon as Edna had the thought, she pushed it away. She lifted her chin and fixed her shoulders, not letting their behavior bring her down. "Good morning," Edna said, in a clear, resolute voice, as they went by. The couple muttered an answer that couldn't be heard, and sped up as they walked into the hotel. Edna shook her head a little as she watched them leave. She could have let their behavior bother her and carried that anger with her all day. But Edna made a different choice. She took another deep breath and told herself how valuable she was. She thought, what they think doesn't define me. I came here to have fun, and that's what I'm going to do. Edna turned her attention back to the cute town in front of her with renewed motivation. The cute buildings and busy streets called out, offering a day full of fun and new things to find. She put her bag back on her shoulder and walked into town, leaving the couple and their prejudices behind. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she walked. She had taken the couple's dislike in stride and come out stronger. What they did didn't ruin her day. Instead, it made her more determined to enjoy every moment. Edna looked around with wide eyes as she walked down the cute streets of the small town. The cute shops and bright windows were very different from the clean hospital hallways she was used to. She felt the stress in her shoulders start to melt away as she walked. When she walked into the shop, the smell of old books and fresh coffee hit her like a warm hug. Edna ran her fingers along the edges of old books and picked up a few that interested her. Sitting down in a soft armchair in a quiet part of the store, she lost herself in a moving story. Edna later found herself in a nearby art show. She felt something in her soul that hadn't been there in a long time. When she saw the bright paintings and detailed sculptures, she was looking at a very moving piece, a swirl of colors. That seemed to show what hope and strength are all about. Being aware of her strength made her feel good. She sat on a bench in the town square and watched kids play and couples walk hand in hand, while the afternoon sun warmed her face. When she closed her eyes, she could hear the birds singing and the soft splash of the nearby waterfall. She felt truly at peace for the first time in months. Edna's thoughts went back to her life at home, where she worked long shifts and felt constantly pressured to be strong for her patients. She realized how important it had been for her to take a break and get back in touch with herself. She smiled as she thought about the simple pleasures she had enjoyed today, like the smell of freshly baked pastries from a nearby bakery, the sound of laughter from a nearby cafe, and the warmth of the cobblestones under her feet. In her busy life, she often forgot about these little joys, but now, they felt like priceless gifts. As the sun went down, Edna made her way back to the hotel. Her heart felt better than it had been months. She felt so much better after her day of exploring, and she couldn't wait to keep relaxing. When Edna walked into the hotel's fancy lobby, she felt more sure of herself. As she walked past the front desk, she kept her head up and didn't even notice the strange looks from other guests. She was only thinking about one thing, the nice pool she had seen earlier. I changed into my swimsuit and went to the pool area. She was happy that it wasn't too full. In the late afternoon sun, the water sparkled and called to her, promising a cool drink. By dipping her toes in and enjoying the feeling, she slid into the pool with a happy sigh. Edna felt the last bit of stress leave her body as she slid through the water. The sound of the water lapping against the edge of the pool was soothing, and she got lost in her thoughts. She thought about the people she had helped over the years. She remembered the young mother who was scared during a difficult birth, the old man whose hand she held as he died, and the child whose contagious laughter had made even the worst days in the pediatric ward better. Edna felt warm inside when she thought about how she had changed so many people's lives. Even though she had to deal with problems and bias at work, she felt very fulfilled in her role as a nurse. She was floating on her back and looking up at the sky. She was so thankful that her calling had come to her. Edna was floating quietly in the pool when she heard voices she knew coming closer. At first look, she saw the middle-aged couple moving toward a pair of nearby lounge chairs. Just a little, Edna's heart sank, but she told herself to stay upbeat. Edna got out of the pool, wrapped herself in a soft towel, and sat down in her own chair. She took out the book she had brought with her, determined to lose herself in it and forget about the couple that was there. She was reading while the warm afternoon sun caressed her skin, and a light breeze carried the smell of tropical flowers. Things were calm for a while. Edna lost herself in her book and forgot about the world around her. Suddenly, there was a groan that broke the silence. Edna jumped out of her book when she heard the noise. A man in his middle years was holding his chest, and his face was twisted in pain. His wife, voice rising with worry, asked, "Harold, what's wrong?" "My chest," Harold gasped, having a hard time breathing. "It hurts, I can't breathe." Edna watched as things happened, and her nurse senses kicked in right away. It was clear to her that something was very wrong. The man's face had turned a scary gray color, and it was clear that he was having trouble breathing. The wife started to freak out, and her eyes were moving all over the place. "Help! Help us!" she yelled, her voice shaking with fear. Edna was broken up. She almost rushed to help the man. But she held off because she remembered how the couple had treated her. She saw their guests becoming aware of the noise. Some looked worried, while others didn't know what to do. Edna could see Harold's state getting worse as the seconds went by. His wife was losing it, and her cries for help were getting more and more desperate. In this case, Edna knew that every second was important. As Harold fell to the pool floor, gasping for air and clutching his chest, chaos broke out all around him. The sound of his wife's sharp screams broke the peace of the afternoon in the pool area of the high-end hotel. "Help!" she yelled. "Please help my husband." Her voice was shaking with fear. Guests were scared and separated. Some ran away quickly, while others stood still, not knowing what to do. Harold was in a lot of pain as he writhed on the ground. The air was thick with fear and stress. While making his rounds near the pool, Mr. Henry heard the noise and quickly went over. As he walked up, his shiny shoes slapped against the tiles. And instead of his normal air of superiority, he looked wide-eyed with fear. He asked, "What's going on here?" As he looked around at what he saw, his voice was a little shaky. Harold's wife looked at Mr. Henry with makeup running down her face. "Please do something. I believe my husband is having a heart attack." Mr. Henry's face turned pale as he realized how bad things were. He looked down at Harold and then back at his upset wife, who was fussing with his tie. Without a doubt, the hotel manager was way out of his place. We should call an ambulance," Mr. Henry stuttered as he searched for his phone. As he tried to dial, his hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped the phone in his fear. "Isn't there a doctor around? Don't you have medical staff?" Harold's wife requested, and instead of being snobbish, she was filled with fear and desperation. He shook his head, and sweat was running down his temples. He said, We don't have anyone on staff for emergencies like this." His voice barely above a whisper. The manager's eyes were darting all over the stunned people in the room, looking for someone to help. His normally calm demeanor had completely broken down, making him look lost and useless in this sudden emergency. Edna jumped right into action without thinking twice. She let her years of nursing experience take over, getting rid of any anger or discomfort she was still feeling. Though her heart was racing, she ran to Harold's side with the clear thought. Edna stood strong next to the hurt man and said, "I'm a nurse. Sir, can you hear me?" Harold was very scared, and his breathing was short, painful gasps. Edna quickly checked on him and noticed that his skin was cold and that he was holding onto his chest. She knew the warning signs of a heart attack. When Edna turned to the shocked crowd, her words rang out with authority. "Someone call 911 immediately. We need an ambulance here now." Mr. Henry, who was still messing around with his phone, said thank you and moved out of the way to make the call. She looked back at Harold and kept her hands still as she took Harold's collar off and checked his pulse. To calm him down, Edna said, "Sir, I'm going to help you. Try to stay calm and breathe slowly." There was a shaking woman nearby who was Harold's wife. "Ma'am, does your husband have any heart medication with him?" With tears running down her face, the wife shook her head. "No, he's never had heart problems before." Edna nodded, running through the steps she needed to take in her head. She asked, "Okay, bring me the hotel's first aid kit and an aid, if they have one. Immediately, someone ran to get the things she had asked for. Edna started to press on her chest. People in the room and on staff were stunned and kept quiet as she worked hard, her moves deliberate and purposeful. Some of the people who had earlier laughed at her were now amazed and thankful. Mr. Henry came back with a pale face. His voice was shaking as he said, "The ambulance is on its way." Edna nodded, but she didn't stop her beat. "Good. Now I need everyone to step back and give us some space." As Edna continued to save lives, her calm attitude and skilled actions were very different from the chaos that had started just moments before. Right then and there, all the biases and assumptions that had shaped her stay at the hotel seemed to go away. To save a life was now the only thing that counted. Edna worked hard to keep Harold steady, and her hands moved with practiced accuracy. She kept pressing on her chest and counting under her breath, her attention never leaving the task at hand. She didn't stop for even a second, even though her face was wet. She said, "Come on, sir," but her voice was hard to make out. "Stay with us." Someone from the hotel staff came back with the aid and first aid kit. Following the device's automated directions, Edna quickly put the defibrillator pads on Harold's chest. Harold's heart rate was being studied by the machine, and Edna was getting ready to shock him if needed. She yelled, "Clear," to make sure no one was touching Harold. After the shock was given, Edna started compressions again right away. Mr. Henry stood close, and the cold look on his face had been replaced by one of awe and shock. Despite the fact that he had laughed at her, he saw Edna fight to save a life with amazing skill and drive. He was hit hard by how bad things were, and a wave of shame went through him. Harold's wife quietly cried as she watched Edna's every move. It broke her heart to think about how close she was to losing her husband, and how brave this stranger was in trying to save him. She reached out and grabbed Mr. Henry's arm to help her. With tears in her eyes, the wife whispered, She's amazing." Mr. Henry couldn't say anything, but nodded. Edna was cool and focused, which stood out against the chaos of the scene. She kept working, her steps steady and deliberate, and her words clear, as she told those around her what to do. People watching thought the minutes went by in what seemed like hours. Edna didn't give up. She was determined the whole time. She kept an eye on Harold's vital signs, changed her methods as needed, and kept giving it her all to save his life. As Edna kept trying to save lives, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Within seconds, paramedics ran to the scene with their gear. Edna made the change from being a lone rescuer to being part of a trained team without a hitch. Suspected myocardial infarction, Edna told the lead rescuer in a clear voice. "I've been performing CPR for approximately 12 minutes. One shock delivered via aid 5 minutes ago." The paramedics nodded, amazed by how accurate Edna's information was and how calm she was. They quickly took over and attached Harold to their more advanced tools. Edna took a step back, but stayed close, ready to help if it was needed. Mr. Henry was amazed at how well Edna worked with the rescue team. Every move she made and every word she spoke showed how skilled she was. He felt terrible when he thought about how he had treated her before. Harold's wife stood close, tears running down her face. She couldn't take her eyes off of Edna, the woman who had done so much to save her husband's life. She was very upset when she realized how close she was to losing Harold. She shook with emotion as the rescuers worked to stabilize him. Edna gave them more details about his situation and the steps she had taken to help him. Even though there was stress in the air, she always kept a professional attitude. After what seemed like forever, the rescuers finally got Harold ready to be taken to the hospital. As they carefully put him on a stretcher, the sound of monitors buzzing filled the room. One of the rescuers said, "We've got a pulse," which made everyone in the room breathe a sigh of relief. As the wheels took Harold away, his wife followed behind. For a split second, her eyes met Edna's. It was clear from the look in her eyes that she was grateful, but she couldn't say anything at that time. As soon as the ambulance drove off, the pool area went quiet. The sounds of the ambulance could be heard far away. Sad and nervous, because of recent events that were weighing on everyone there. Mr. Henry stood still, unable to get back to his normal state of calm. As soon as the ambulance's siren stopped, there was a heavy quiet around the pool. The staff and guests stood still, their eyes still fixed on the spot where Harold had come down. They slowly spread out, as if they were waking up from a dream. As people tried to figure out what they had just seen, they spoke in whispers and looked at each other with worry. Edna stayed by the pool because the rescue effort had made her heart beat fast. She took a big breath and felt sad and relieved at the same time. The energy that had pushed her to act was now wearing off, leaving her tired and emotional. Edna was by the pool by herself when the last of the people who were watching left. It was eerily quiet in the oasis that used to be peaceful. She lost her mind as she looked at the moving water. The last hour's events played over and over in her head like a clear movie. Edna slowly made her way back to her room after putting her things away with a heavy sigh. With each step, the hotel hallways seemed longer than they had been. Each one made her think of how quickly things can change. She couldn't help but think about Harold and his wife as she walked. She really hoped that he would get better. Edna leaned against the door to her room as she went in, and gently shut it behind her. She was surrounded by quiet, which was very different from the chaos she had just been through. She went to the window and looked out at the lovely view. That had made her feel so hopeful a few days before. Edna's thoughts went to the strange turn her trip had taken. What was meant to be a time to unwind and recharge had turned into something completely different. But even though the day was stressful and emotional, she felt like she had a reason to live. Being a nurse, which was something she had wanted to forget for a while, had saved a life. Edna woke up the next morning emotionally drained. The things that happened the day before were still fresh in her mind. The tightness in her shoulders was still there. So she sat on the edge of her bed and ran her fingers through her hair. Her phone rang while she sipped her coffee in the morning. When she saw that it was the area hospital calling, her heart skipped a beat. She answered with shaking hands. A nice voice asked, "Hello, is this Edna Johnson?" Edna said, "Yes, this is she." But her voice was barely above a whisper. "Miss Johnson, calling from Memorial Hospital. Regarding the gentleman you helped yesterday at the hotel. I'm pleased to inform you that he's stable and expected to make a full recovery." Edna's eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, and her voice broke with feeling. It went on with the nurse on the phone. "The doctor said your quick action and CPR saved his life. His family wanted to express their deepest gratitude." At the end of the call, Edna felt a sense of relaxation. She took a long, deep breath and leaned back in her chair. She felt a weight lift off her chest that had been there since yesterday. The edges of her mouth turned up in a small smile. Even though she had to deal with problems and bias at the hotel, Edna felt like she had accomplished something. Because she was smart and skilled, she made a big difference. Someone was saved by her. She went to the window and took a look at the sunny day. Things looked a little better now. She had a new sense of purpose when she thought about why she had become a nurse in the first place. To help people and make a difference, no matter who they were or how they treated her. A soft knock on Edna's door just as she was getting ready to go out for breakfast. When she opened it, the hotel manager, Mr. Henry, was standing there with an especially sorry face. He said, "Miss Johnson," but his voice was softer than before. "The couple from the incident yesterday has requested to see you. They're in the lobby. Would you be willing to meet with them?" Edna's heart beat fast. She didn't know what to expect, but she said, "Yes. Yes, I'll meet them." He led her to a quiet spot in the hallway where a couple was sitting. The husband was in a wheelchair and was still pale and weak. His wife stood next to him. She had tears in her eyes, making them red and puffy. When Edna got close, the couple looked up. Hey, their looks showed that they felt bad, thankful, and sorry. The wife took a step forward, shaking her hands. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice shaking. We can't begin to express how sorry we are for our behavior." Erica's husband reached out and took her hand. He said, "You saved my life," in a voice that was almost a whisper. "After everything we said, the way we treated you." The wife's eyes filled with tears. "We were so wrong," she admitted. "Our attitudes, our words, they were inexcusable. We've spent the night talking about how ashamed we are." Edna didn't say anything while she listened. It was clear that they were sincere from the way they spoke. "Your professionalism and kindness in the face of our racism," the husband said, but he was having trouble saying it. "It's opened our eyes. We've been forced to confront our prejudices, and we're deeply sorry." The wife wiped away tears as she nodded. "You didn't hesitate to help, even after how we treated you. We can't thank you enough, and we can't apologize enough either." There was a lump in Edna's throat. She wasn't ready for this, and the couple's rough feeling was too much for her to handle. She took a deep breath, and her heart felt a lot of different things. She looked at the couple. The regret and thanks on their faces were real. "Thank you for being sorry," Edna said, in a soft, steady voice. "We all make mistakes, and what matters most is how we learn and grow from them." The couple looked at her with shock and relief on their faces, showing that they were not expecting such a kind answer. "In my work as a nurse," she said, "I've learned that compassion is the most powerful tool we have. It doesn't matter how people treat us. What matters is how we choose to treat others." His eyes were getting teary as he squeezed Edna's hand. "You're an extraordinary person, Miss Johnson. We don't deserve your kindness." Edna gave a head. "It's not about deserving. It's about understanding and growing. We're all human, and we all have the capacity to change and become better." The wife stepped forward, and her voice was full of sadness. "Thank you, not just for saving my husband's life, but for this valuable lesson. We promise to carry it with us always." Edna gave a warm smile. "That's all I could ask for. Use this experience to spread kindness and understanding to others." The couple honestly nodded, and they both wiped away tears. The husband looked up at Edna with thanks in his eyes. "We can't thank you enough for what you've done. You've not only saved my life, but also opened our eyes to our own prejudices. We'll never forget this." Edna felt a rush of strong emotions. She didn't think this meeting would be so deep, but she could see how the couple's behavior and attitude had changed for the better. "Thank you for listening and for being open to change," she said. "That's the first step towards making the world a little bit better for everyone." The couple told her they would remember what Edna had taught them and thanked her again. As they were walking away, Edna could see the change in their eyes, and knew that what she had done and said had made a real difference. Later that day, Edna saw Mr. Henry coming up behind her as she walked through the hotel hallway. Instead of his normal stern face, he had one that showed doubt and regret. Edna got ready, but she didn't know what to expect. "Miss Johnson," Mr. Henry said, in a voice that Edna had never heard before. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Edna nodded, and her face looked calm but alert. "Of course, Mr. Henry." He took a big breath, and looked like he was having a hard time finding the right words. I owe you an apology. My behavior towards you since your arrival has been inexcusable." Edna's eyes got a little bigger when the boss told her the truth. She didn't say anything, so he could go on. "Well, just had some biases that made me think certain things about you," Mr. Henry admitted, his cheeks turning red with shame. "I was wrong, terribly wrong, and I'm truly sorry for how I treated you." Edna could see that Mr. Henry really felt bad about what he did. She agreed with what he said by nodding. "What you did yesterday by the pool was..." Mr. Henry stopped and shook his head in awe. "It was extraordinary. Your courage, your professionalism, I've never seen anything like it. You saved that man's life when the rest of us were paralyzed with fear." Mr. Henry's speech got a little weaker as he went on. "I'm ashamed of how I behaved towards you. You deserved better, and I'm determined to make things right. If you'll allow me." Mr. Henry's behavior had changed, and Edna could see it. The boss, who used to be rude and cold, now stood in front of her, sorry, and asking for forgiveness. It was a strong reminder of how sometimes deeds are more powerful than words, and can change people's minds in strange ways. Mr. Henry cleared his throat and shook his hands tensely. "Hey, Miss Johnson, I'd like to offer you an extra night stay at the hotel at no extra cost. It's the least I can do to thank you for what you did, and to make up for what I did." Edna raised an eyebrow in shock. She wasn't ready for such a kind offer. She paused for a moment, not sure what to say. She wanted to politely say no to show that she didn't need his help and kept her pride. But another part of her saw this as a chance to really enjoy the vacation she had worked so hard for. "Thank you very much, Mr. Henry," Edna said, in a soft voice, her mind full of ideas. Mr. Henry nodded, and his eyes looked hopeful. "Please think about it for a while. Our rough start makes me understand if you'd rather not. But I promise things will be different from now on." Edna took a big breath and thought about what she could do. There were still peaceful moments by the pool she could enjoy, and she thought about the beautiful hotel grounds she had yet to fully explore. She also thought about the chance to really rest without the weight of prejudice hanging over her. Edna made her choice after giving it some thought. "Say thanks to Mr. Henry. Thank you for your offer. I think I'll take it." Mr. Henry's face lit up with happiness. "That's great to hear, Miss Johnson. I promise you'll have a much better time for the rest of your stay." When Edna agreed and nodded, she felt like the discussion was over. The stress that had been building up since she got there started to go away. She understood that her extended stay wasn't just a chance to enjoy high-class amenities. It was also a chance to heal and see how her actions had helped other people change for the better. "I'm looking forward to it," Edna said, with a real smile. This was the first time since she got here that she felt like she really belonged. As Edna's longer stay started, she noticed that the hotel atmosphere had changed in a very noticeable way. The staff used to be cold and unfriendly, but now, they smiled and were genuinely nice to her. It was like her brave deeds helped them see past their prejudices and first impressions. Edna was shocked to find a beautifully set table waiting for her when she got to the breakfast spread one morning. A young waiter walked up with a huge smile on his face. "Dear Miss Johnson, good morning. Today, we've made you a special breakfast." The act made Edna feel touched, and a lump formed in her mouth. She finally got out, "Thank you," her voice heavy with feeling. Throughout the day, more acts of kindness like these kept happening. The spa workers gave her a free massage and told her how brave and quick-thinking she was. At the pool, someone always made sure she had clean towels and her favorite drink close by. But what really amazed Edna was how Mr. Henry had changed. The cold and rude boss she had met the first time was gone. His place was taken by a man who seemed truly determined to make things right and make her feel better. Edna was relaxing in the yard of the hotel one afternoon when Mr. Henry walked up to her with a soft smile. "Miss Johnson, I hope everything is going well for you," he said, in a friendly and polite tone. Edna nodded, still a little confused by how he had changed. "Thank you, yes, everyone has been nice." Mr. Henry looked at me with sincere eyes. "That makes me happy. We've all been moved by what you did to be better and see things more clearly. I want you to know that being here has really made a difference." Edna could tell that he had changed as he talked. It wasn't just about making up for past mistakes. Mr. Henry seemed to have really grown and learned from it. "Really?" he asked. "Is there anything else we can do to make your stay more enjoyable?" Edna smiled and felt warm all over. "Everyone has already done a lot. I'm just glad to be here and enjoy this lovely spot without any stress or pain." Mr. Henry nodded, because he knew what she was saying meant a lot. "Miss Johnson, it's an honor to have you here. If you need anything, please don't be afraid to ask." As he left, Edna leaned back in her chair and enjoyed the garden's beauty and the peace she felt. She felt like she belonged for the first time since she got there. As the days of Edna's long stay went by, Mr. Henry couldn't help but think about how much she had changed the hotel and its staff. He was sure that he wanted to do something special that would remind them of the lessons they had all learned for a long time. Mr. Henry asked Edna to join him for tea in the hotel's fancy room one afternoon. Edna saw a hint of excitement in his eyes as they sat down. "Miss Johnson," Mr. Henry said, in a friendly voice, "I've been thinking a lot about your time here and what a huge difference you've made. We want to do something special to thank you for being kind and brave." Edna turned her head to the side, interested in what he was thinking. Mr. Henry smiled and went on. "We've decided to name a suite after you. It's called the Heart of Kindness Suite. Everyone here at the hotel will always remember how brave you were and how much we've learned from you." Erica's eyes got really big in shock. She was filled with joy, humility, and a strong sense of what she had accomplished. "I'm not sure what to say to Mr. Henry. That's such an amazing thing to do. It's the least we can do," Mr. Henry said, and his eyes lit up with pride. "What you did not only saved a life, it also changed our minds and hearts. This suite will be a sign of kindness, telling us and our guests of the power of being kind and how important it is to look past what you see." She could feel tears coming to her eyes. It was never in her wildest dreams that her trip would become so important. She felt very strongly about her purpose, because her actions had caused such a big change in the hotel and its staff. "Thank you," Edna said, in a soft voice that showed how she felt. "I'm truly grateful. I hope that this suite will make other people want to be kind and understanding no matter what." Mr. Henry nodded, and it was clear that what Edna said moved him. "That's what we really want, Miss Johnson. Following your stay, your impact will live on and affect the lives of many guests and staff for years to come." As the big hall at the hotel grew warmer and more excited for the ceremony, it finally came around. As guests talked happily to each other, staff members rushed around making last-minute preparations. The room looked elegant and festive thanks to the flowers and soft lights that were used to decorate it. Edna took slow breaths to calm her racing heart as she stood nervously at the door. She had never liked being the center of attention, but the real smiles and respectful nods from the people around her helped her feel better. The crowd went silent as she walked into the room. Mr. Henry stepped forward with a proud grin on his face and led Edna to the front of the room with care. Hotel workers, guests, and to Edna's surprise, the couple whose lives she had changed so deeply were all there. Mr. Henry shook his head and spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to honor a truly remarkable person. Edna Johnson stayed at our hotel as a guest, but she left as a hero who inspires all of us." Edna felt a lump in her throat as Mr. Henry talked about what happened that terrible day by the pool. As she looked around the room, she saw that many people were crying, including the man's wife. Edna's quick thinking and selfless actions not only saved a life, but also opened our eyes to the power of compassion and the dangers of prejudice, Mr. Henry said. "More. It is my great honor to present this plaque to Edna Johnson in recognition of her bravery and kindness." The room went wild with cheers when Edna walked up to take the plaque. As the sound got louder, everyone stood up and gave Edna a standing applause. Edna felt waves of respect and love from the loud applause that went on for what seemed like forever. Edna could not hold back her tears as they ran down her face. There were proud smiles on Mr. Henry's face, tears on the couple she had saved's faces, and loud cheers from the hotel staff. Edna knew at that moment that what she had done had not only saved a life, but also changed many people's minds. Mr. Henry took another step forward, this time with a new sense of purpose in his eyes. He cleared his throat and spoke to the crowd with strong confidence. "Women and men, and his daring and kindness, have not only saved a life, but also shown us how important it is to treat everyone with respect and include everyone. I'm happy to say that our hotel will be starting new programs today to help our guests and workers understand and live by these values." As Mr. Henry went on, there was a murmur of attention from the crowd. "All of our employees will get diversity training so that everyone who comes through our doors feels welcome and important. We will also be working with community groups in the area to offer internships to people from groups that aren't usually represented in the hospitality business." Edna listened carefully, and her pride made her heart race. She couldn't believe that what she did had caused such a big change in the rules and culture of the hotel. Mr. Henry went on to talk about more projects, such as a grant program for people from different backgrounds who want to work in hospitality, and a promise to use art by local artists of color all over the hotel. Edna looked around at the faces as he talked. The staff members agreed, and some of them had tears in their eyes. The announcement made everyone smile and cheer, and even the couple she had saved looked touched. The room exploded in applause again when Mr. Henry was done speaking. Edna felt very happy and satisfied. She came to this hotel to relax and rest, but she left with a lot more than that. Not only had she saved a life, but her efforts had also caused changes in the hotel that made it a friendlier place for everyone. After the cheers stopped, Mr. Henry looked at Edna. He thanked her and waved his hand to show that he understood that her impact had caused these changes. Edna smiled back, and she felt a bond with the manager that she had never felt before. As Edna put her bags away, she couldn't help but think about how different her trip from what she had planned had been. She carefully folded her clothes as her mind wandered to the events of the past few days, the initial hurt of racism, the life-saving emergency by the pool, and how she had changed the hotel and its people. Now, all looked like a blur. Edna closed her bag and looked around the room one last time. The plaque she had been given caught her eye. It was carefully wrapped and put into her carry-on. It wasn't just a sign of appreciation. It was a lesson of how powerful kindness and strength can be. Edna felt a lot of different things as she walked down to the entrance. She felt a little sad to be leaving this place that had become so important to her, but she was also very excited about what was to come. She knew she had to go back to her hard job as a nurse, but it didn't feel like a drag anymore. Instead, it felt like a calling that had been revived and strengthened by her time here. Mr. Henry was waiting for her in the lobby. He was not at all like the cold, rude man who had met her when she first arrived. "A warm Miss Johnson," he said. "I hope you know that you've made us all better. Because you were kind and brave, you taught us very important lessons." Edna smiled and felt warm all the way through her chest. "Say thanks to Mr. Henry. This place was where I came to rest, but it gave me so much more. I'm thankful for the chance to have made a difference." Eileen took a big breath of the fresh morning air as she left the hotel. Not only did the rest she got make her feel better, but the big difference she made also did. It felt good to carry the weight of her experiences, not as a burden, but as a source of power. When Edna got into the ready taxi, she was thankful for the unexpected trip she'd been on. She knew she was leaving with more than just memories. As the hotel went out of sight, it gave her a new sense of purpose, a better understanding of how powerful humanity can be, and the belief that one act of kindness could really change the world. Would you do what Edna did and help someone who had hurt you or judged you in the past? Tell me in the comments whether you agree or disagree. I'd love to hear your point of view. Also, please follow my channel if you liked the video. Thank you so much for your support. I spend hours and hours writing these touching stories for you.